There's no such thing as a Christian liberal. I heard this by a Christian leader the other day, and it really just got to me because it's just so ridiculous, and it's a big part of the reason why we have so many people leaving the faith. It's people like this saying judgmental statements like that. So let's jump into it. Let's break down why this statement is patently false. Number one, let's go to the definition of liberal, right? Willing to respect or accept behavior or opinions different than one's own, open to new ideas. By the very definition of liberal, God has given us free will and listens and acts upon our prayers and respects our decision if we decide not to follow him, because he's a gentleman. You see how that aligns with the definition? Essentially, a part of his character is liberal, yet this Christian leader decided to say, you can't be a Christian if you're liberal. And he more so brought it to the part around, you can't be that because, let's say, you might believe in pro-choice. And I mean, there's so many different pathways I could go into regarding that. But let's just jump into the three main sections that I wanted to cover here. Number one, progressive sanctification. Number two, sin permeates. And number three, conservative Pharisees. So number one, progressive sanctification. Did you just become a Christian and knew everything, every principle, every rule, even though there's really no rules? It's an identity thing. It's ridiculous to think that anybody's just born a believer and knows every single aspect of it. It's like saying, oh yeah, you're Jewish, so you know everything about there is to know about it, when they are constantly asking questions of the rabbi, as we as Christians should be too, or our pastors, to understand the Bible. I remember an Eastern Orthodox priest that's had many decades of experience. He himself said, there is guys above me that are actually prophet level. They're clairvoyant. Have all these gifts. I know only this specific niche of the Christian faith. And so that humility is where we should be, and understand that sanctification is a progressive thing. So to say, oh, if you're a baby Christian and you have liberal policies still in your mind, I mean, first of all, it's ridiculous to say you're not a Christian because of that. But second, it's, you're going to be throughout your life understanding different nuances. Some parts you're not going to agree with, some parts you are. And the Bible doesn't say if you're a liberal or conservative or Democrat or whatever party, you aren't allowed into God's kingdom. It's just obnoxious. It's ridiculous. I'm going to repeat those words because it just bothers me that we have asinine comments like this being spouted all the time, all this judgment, all this looking down at people, and not actually following Jesus's steps of love, of care, of, oh, okay, well, tell me about why you don't believe in the anti-abortion policy. Matter of fact, I could share a recent example. A family member was going through something where it turned out the baby was not viable, it was not growing, and the staff actually mentioned that the state is contemplating a policy that even though the baby was not viable for several weeks, that the policy would essentially make that bringing the baby out illegal, even though the baby is not actually viable, like 100%. But because of that state involvement, that family member would not be able to get that done. So essentially the state would take over the woman's body, even though the all the experts are saying, like, you're going to have serious complications if we just do not do this procedure. So there's nuance to this, but many Christians are just looking at just the front end part of the equation. No consideration for the human being, for every aspect of the like womb to tomb factors too. Like, you just want to save the baby and not care about, providing financial assistance. Like, the first thing I hear deep red Republicans say is, all these people just want to get on welfare. And well, what are you talking about? What do you want to go into details about that, or you just want to go ahead and spout something that people are doing, even though you have no evidence that it's being done at a widespread scale? I have a family member, an elderly family member, that makes $500 a month, and she doesn't even qualify for welfare. So how is this at scale, people taking advantage of the system actually happening if she doesn't even qualify? Where's your evidence behind it? Are you just saying this because that's all you've been heard or have been hearing as truth, or is it actual reality? So that's the progressive sanctification part. Like, it's stupid to just detract somebody's experience and know that you know better on the front end and just say, oh, you're a liberal, you're not real Christian. You just live with demons, and that's all you are. Which brings me to my next point. Number 2, sin permeates. So as I was a baby Christian, I had a lunch with my pastor, and he asked me, do you believe you're going to heaven? And I said, I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody is sure, because of my sin, right? Like, I'm still struggling with that. And I was frank with him about that, and he said, well, everybody goes through this process, and just think about your morning. It's easy to probably sin like 10 times before you even get out of bed. Like, you could be slamming your alarm clock. You could be angry at appointment for the day. Even on the way to work, for example, you could be yelling at or having bad thoughts about somebody that cut you off. So think about what you could do to sanctify, to progress through that sin, through the strength of God. Not necessarily you have to be perfect for the rest of your life. And so this is the type of thing we got to think about when we think about sin. And instead of looking at a Christian liberal as somebody who's not Christian, not deserving of God's glory and faith and love, think about, man, sin is all around us and will be until we die. The only thing we can do is transform, accept God's love, so that we could transform that sin into something to overcome, as opposed to, this is something I'm going to live with the rest of my life. And that's been something I've worked through. There's been many sins in my life I have overcome, but it took years, which again makes this statement so obnoxious. There's no such thing as a Christian liberal. If somebody told me that when I was early on in my faith, I would be like debilitated. Like, it's just hopeless. Like, I grew up in a blue city, Chicago, been blue for probably over 100 years now, Democratic. But I wouldn't make it like, oh, since he's in a liberal type city, like, oh, there's no possibility that he's Christian, a real Christian, because he believes in pro-choice with some nuance. There's no way he's a real Christian. It's so disgusting. It makes me think of, well, you likely wouldn't even consider Jesus to be a Christian then, because he came to address the Pharisees, which were essentially conservatives. They lived every part of the law to the letter without any nuance, without any contemplation to what's going on. It makes me think of the situation where they were all excited to go throw stones at a prostitute. And Jesus, of course, said, whoever is without sin, throw the first or cast the first stone. There's just no consideration, right? Of course, they're living in sin. They're living in their internal bleeding of sin and not dealing with it. But when it comes to somebody else, oh yeah, let's go to town and stone everybody we can. You know, it's conservatives are the new Pharisees. They follow laws without nuance for the person or the situation. And on top of that, they follow a leader embedded in sin like they themselves are in. So they too have failed. Now, this doesn't mean that they're hopeless. It's not a justification to say, well, you're not a real Christian. That's ridiculous. It's just a missing of perspective is all it is, right? Like, we get used to these things growing up, and we just see them as, okay, well, that's just reality, and that's what we got to deal with. I'll give you a negative to our city that I'm open to discussing. In Chicago, there could be a exit ramp here on our interstate that takes 10 years to fix. And I know that's just corruption in the government. That would never happen in Georgia. I mean, I think it's largely because we have a balanced part of the equation. We have both Democrats and Republicans. It's not just one-sided kind of feeding cycle of themselves, which is exactly what corruption is, right? It's just circles of money and their own circles. But if you have two different parties where you have to compromise, negotiate, what's that phrase I like to use? If two people agree all the time, one of them is unnecessary. So there's a value to that. And don't be saying stupid stuff like there's no such thing as a Christian liberal, like this Christian leader said. It just detracts people from the faith. It debilitates people in the faith. You know, it's just obnoxious. I really wanted to make this because I'm passionate about people. As many of you know, my CEO-ship is leading a company, directly helping people and being profitable at the same time. So it's really important to me when I see people in pain or even have an inkling they're about to be in pain. I go out of my way to see what I could do to stave it off. So I hope you grow to do the same. It's a very Jesus type way of living, but we all have different talents. I know not everybody's built like me too. I have a very specific type of talent, but don't let somebody like this saying these atrocious things about people mean anything to you. They're just lost. They have a misconception of what Christianity is, and you know, I love you. So have an amazing, awesome rest of your year here. I'm sure I'll be making another video on From Pain to Gain soon. Later, family.